Good evening, folks. This is Deb. And tonight, I'm making what I consider to be a very important video, and it does have some relevance to what's going on today in the United States. Now, 55 years ago today, 4 students were slaughtered at Kent State University during a protest against the Viet Nam War. Richard Nixon was in office at the time. He had run on a law and order platform in 1968 and won the presidency. And the Republican Party was pushing, as you may have guessed, their law and order policy versus the left, which were considered the lawless Americans, okay? Now, Governor Rhodes, who was also a Republican, the governor of Ohio, had called the protesters the worst kind of people, basically. And Richard Nixon managed to get his digs in there when he said that when dissent turns to violence, it invites tragedy. There was no violence. At no time was the National Guard ever in danger. There was no sniper. That was debunked. Were the instigators on campus? Yes, and it is now known that at least one of those instigators was working for the FBI. The students lit fire to the ROTC building, but there was absolutely no cause or need for Ohio National Guard troops to open fire on students. I believe only one of those students was actually involved in protesting. A couple of them were simply on their way to class when they were killed. But this event is really what sent me off into my activist role. It shocked me. I couldn't believe it actually happened. I had been a political junkie for a while. I was only 16 at the time. I still didn't have a license. But I had been watching the news, and I had been heavily involved in watching what was going on in the 60s. So I was in tune with all this stuff, and it really resonated with me. But it wasn't until after Kent State that I realized that there were 2 events before and after that received absolutely no attention. On February 8th, 1968, one day after my 14th birthday, highway patrolmen and police opened fire on African-American students at South Carolina State College. This happened after a few days of sit-ins and protests about a segregated bowling alley. And this was the very first time in American history that police killed college students. 3 people died and 28 were wounded. On May 15th, 1970, 11 days after Kent State, police opened fire on African-American students at Jackson State College in Mississippi. They had been protesting Richard Nixon's invasion of Cambodia. The students were unarmed. There was about 100 of them. There were some altercations. There was some fire set. The fires have been put out. And, the firemen left after they put the fires out. And then the police moved to disperse the crowd. At about 12:05 in the morning, 40 state highway patrolmen, using shotguns, opened fire from a range of about 30 to 50 feet and fired 460 rounds in 30 seconds, killing 2 students and wounding 12. One of those students was a high school student, wasn't even a college student. He had been visiting the campus. So the reason I bring this up is because, killing Black folks down south was practically a sport at this time. What really captivated everybody's attention was the fact that 4 white students from the heartland of America were shot and killed by National Guardsmen. But all of these students, all of them, were massacred. And the two bookends for Kent State must never be forgotten as well. They've virtually never even been investigated. In fact, Kent State was investigated. 8 guardsmen were charged, at least 5 of them we know fired the guns and killed people. Nobody was ever held accountable in any of these killings. I bring this up because here we are in America today, and we have massive protests going on, and these must continue. And I know people are nervous about just exactly what lengths Donald Trump will go to. But if you think about what has gone on in the United States, anything that we have ever had to fight for has never been without, danger involved, okay? People died during the labor movement, okay? There was a series of things that happened. There was the Ludlow Massacre of 1914, okay? That happened during the labor movement. The civil rights movement, Medgar Evers and Martin Luther King Jr. were assassinated, okay? Students who went down to Mississippi to register black people to vote were literally shot to death by the Klan and buried in a construction site. So there has always been this threat, okay? But what's going on here in America today is a little different than, fighting for, voting rights or gay rights or women's rights or labor unions. What's going on here right now in this country is that we have a fascist takeover going on. When Richard Nixon fell from grace, the Republican Party didn't stand behind him. They actually worked to get him out. They did not want him to be the albatross around their neck. We're in a very different spot. We have a Republican Party that is either one of two things. They are either full-on fascist, just like Donald Trump. And yes, that is what he is, okay? We can't dance around this anymore. Or they are total cowards, just figuring out that the way to get through this is to give him whatever he wants at the expense of the American people. This country is in serious danger, okay? Democracy is on life support here. And we must not let this slip away because, to be perfectly honest with you, the real danger comes from inaction. The real danger will come from not doing something about this, because the life we will lead under Donald Trump, if he is allowed to have his way, will not be a life that anyone will be able to tolerate. So while we are all nervous and we are all afraid, we must continue to be on the streets. The next big event, and there will be ones before this event, will be June 14th, to coincide with the day that Donald Trump wants his massive military parade in Washington. No kings, folks. This cannot happen in America. People have fought and died in the Revolutionary War to gain freedom. And we must fight now to make sure that we keep our democracy intact so we can build a more perfect union. And believe me, we have a lot of changes to make once we get there. But we must not be paralyzed by fear. I will talk to you all later.